What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the inaugural edition of the Tuesday NFL Blitz. And I know you're thinking, well, today is not Tuesday, but you know something? Who cares? This is going to be my new weekly podcast I'm going to be doing with one of my best friends, my buddy Anthony Pellegrino. What's going on, Anthony?
Not much, Sean, man. Thank you for bringing me in on this.
Anthony and I have been, for a long time wanting to do an NFL podcast. We talked about it, but, today we were just like, something, screw it. It's time to get it going. And believe it or not, Anthony and I used to do a podcast about 8 years ago about Shinedown before they released their album, Sound of Madness, I believe it was. And so this is kind of a coming back together, a reunion of the greats of some sorts, except we're not like the Rolling Stones, Instead of like 10,000 or 100,000 people at a concert, there'd be like 40 views on this video. So
yeah, I like doing a podcast. It's one thing I've always had interest in doing. Even going back to when we did that Shinedown one, I really had a good time doing those. And I had my own film podcast. I did about like 7 or 8 of them, and there's actually quite a good amount of views. But the problem was it was just so hard to consistently keep making them. Because it was like, oh, you missed all the movies one week. What are you going to talk about them if you didn't see them? So at least football, like I know I'll be watching football every week.
And as stated before, we're going to try to do this every single Tuesday. It is going to be every single Tuesday, correction. That way the Monday Night Football game is over and we get a fresh start. So today, on the inaugural edition of the Tuesday Blitz, and by the way, guys, we're going to try to get this up on iTunes as well here in the near future. So please excuse any of this very early recordings. We're still learning these programs. So for recording audio, so it might sound a little cavemanish. But without further ado, let's jump right into it and start talking about some football. And today we're going to be previewing the AFC South and NFC South, the two hardest divisions in football. By far, and of course I say that with great sarcasm. And what better team to start out with than the Tennessee Titans? This was a squad last year. They was 2-14. They drafted Marcus Mariota. There's a little bit of expectations around them. What are your thoughts and predictions for the Titans this year, Anthony?
I don't see the Tennessee Titans being any better, really, than they were last year. I know they added Marcus Mariota, but he's a rookie. They didn't add much on the defense, and realistically, it's like the only way you can win in that division is if you were to have like a stud defense or a stud offense, because no one's going to really dethrone Indy. But I could see them being maybe a little bit more competitive in the division. I do like Marcus Mariota, though.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I like Marcus Mariota. I like his physical tools. I like his presence. You and I were talking before the show a little bit about some of the throws this guy was able to make in the preseason. He's looked really good, but he's also made some bonehead rookie decisions as well. Something you'd expect with a young quarterback. Week 1, the NFL, being smart, has Tampa Bay and Tennessee going up against one another. So it's the battle of Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota in Week 1, baby. So that'll be interesting to see.
No,
but
I do like Marcus Mariota more than I like Jameis Winston.
Jameis Winston, to me, just has bust written all over him. All I see is really Jamarcus Russell 2.0. That's all I see.
Yeah, I mean, I watched him a little bit in college, and he played. I mean, he was outstanding, but I just don't see him translating well to the NFL. Everything I've seen from him now, he's missed throws, he's made bonehead plays. Mariota actually is a very, very smart quarterback. And I'm not knocking Jameis Winston. I know he got like incredibly high scores. He had like the highest like the actual score that they do for I forgot what it's called. It's like
for the scouting?
Yeah, it's like a scouting test that they do.
Yeah.
He passed incredibly high on it. But I do like Mariota. I like how he's very, very precise, and he can hit a dime like running. He's a good prospect. I'm excited to kind of watch him this year.
The thing is with me and Winston is like you look at a guy who came into the draft overweight to begin with, so he already had questions about his character. He's got arm for days, but accuracy, is a question. He's got a team that has some decent receivers, and he's got a running back. Hopefully, if he stays healthy, he can hand the ball off to. But it's like Mariota it's just like he's just that guy. He looks better. He looks like better accuracy. Just the physical tools there, and just the pocket presence just looks a lot better to me than Jameis Winston. But as for the Titans and for what this year, they're going to be drafting in the top 10 next year again. Bishop Sankey is their running back, and he's hurt. He doesn't have many tools on for the wide receiver in their defense. I can remember the Titans defense 6, 7, 8 years ago when they had guys like Van and Bosch and Albert Haynesworth and Cortland Finnegan. They were a really good defensive squad, but it just that was back in the days of Lendell White and Chris Johnson, and they had guys like Nate Washington catching the ball for him. But yeah, they're nothing but a 4-win team, 5-win at most if they get lucky.
Yeah, I mean they added Brian Arakpo, which was it was a huge add, a huge contract that they signed.
Didn't you used to call him a Sackpo or something like that?
Brian Sackpo.
Yeah,
he was. He was great, and he still is a great outside linebacker.
He came out of that draft.
Generate a little bit more pass rush. I know a lot of Tennessee fans are very high on a lot of their defensive prospects, but again, it's just prospects, and realistically, they're an unfinished team. They added Harry Douglas, who I always was a big fan of, as the slot receiver in Atlanta, but it's really hard to make that transition for an NFL quarterback. So I think this year you'll see strides in Tennessee. Obviously, they have a good coach. They have a guy who's done it, but they really do need the help. They don't have a strong running back, which kind of will hurt a rookie quarterback. If you don't have, when your running back is Bishop Sankey, that means you're going to be throwing the ball a lot.
Yeah.
And that means you're going to get a lot of turnovers. You're going to make some mistakes. And so it's going to be a learning curve. But I think that, they're probably better than Jacksonville, I would assume. I don't think them being much better than Jacksonville.
Yeah,
they're going to they will have a top 5 to 6 pick.
Yeah, for sure. It's just like when Sanchez came into the league a couple years ago, he came into a situation where he had a great defense and running backs to hand the ball off to. Mariota just doesn't have that, So
he doesn't have that.
So you're looking at a position for him to falter for sure. It wasn't before we move on here. Wasn't Arakpo in that same draft like Clay Matthews and Brian Cushing and Matt?
Yeah, I think he was. Pick. He was at 7 or something.
Yeah, he was pretty high. I remember that.
He was a high pick in that draft.
Now, moving on to dominant forces in the AFC South, the Jacksonville Jaguars are coming off a year where Blake Bortles took over at the helm after the Jaguars went through a whole quarterback carousel. And, they're going to have another year without Justin Blackmon, who's looking to be a huge draft bust and waste a pick. You got a defense that's not that great, and you got a team that doesn't really have many weapons on offense. So, what are your thoughts about him?
About Blake Bortles?
About the Jaguars as a whole.
Oh, well, I think Blake Bortles last year was a bad pick, and I think his play showed that it was a bad pick. I think Jacksonville Jaguars fans are kind of regretting that pick right now. I don't want to knock the kid because it's only his second year, and he's a Jaguar. It's not like you went into a great situation to begin with, but he was an unpolished prospect coming out, and he was another one of those guys who was big body, big arm, but had accuracy problems and showed. But I will say this. The one thing about the Jacksonville Jaguars is they have an underrated wide receiving corps. They got three guys that are all within their first or second year that have high expectations. Like Allen Robinson was really good last year when he played. Allen Hurns was good when he played. And then obviously they have Marcus Lee, who was the highest of the pick. And, he has a lot of potential. So I think that's promising. And they signed Julius Thomas. They still have Mercedes Lewis.
But Thomas is hurt now. Thomas is hurt now. He's going to have surgery on his finger. He's going to miss up to 5 weeks.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
So and then they have T.J. Yeldon, who everyone's very high on in terms of fantasy. I haven't seen anything from him in preseason, but I could see the Jaguars maybe being I can't even see them cracking the top 20 in terms of offense or defense.
Blake Bortles is going to have to show me a lot more this year that he can, he's got the arm, and he's going to be a bit of a gunslinger, but he's got to show me he can make the throws. He's going to be smart with the football. I know he doesn't have a great running back to hand the ball off to, but he's got to be better than he was last year if the Jags are going to win more than 4 games. That's for sure. So they're going to be terrible again this year. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I could see, honestly, there was a conversation I had with someone else, and realistically, I think that they might be the worst team in the NFL going into this, like coming out of this season. I would say that if I had to pick one team that will get the number 1 overall pick, it's a toss-up between them and the Washington Redskins. I don't really see anyone else that could potentially get that pick.
Now, if they do have the number 1 pick next year, what would you draft? Would you draft an offensive lineman to start building around that, like a lot of teams do? Or would you draft like a good wide receiver?
Well, they don't really need a good wide receiver. I think what position, like if there's I don't know, it's hard. I don't really know going into this draft. But if there's like, an Andrew Luck type prospect, which I don't think there is.
But see, I don't think they're willing to give up on Bortles yet after 2 years.
If there's a once in a lifetime prospect and you have pick 1, I think you have to do it. I mean, like Indianapolis 3 years ago or 4 years ago probably could have stayed with Manning, but they had that once in a lifetime opportunity to get this quarterback that everyone knew was going to be a franchise quarterback, and they took it. And it was one of the hardest things that.
But I think that's a bit of a different situation. You had a Manning who was hurt. This is a guy that you went and you took really high up in the draft. I think if anything, a lot of teams, when they start rebuilding, they always usually start with that one cornerstone lineman. That's a really common pick for a team, that is trying to rebuild, or like, someone really good on defense, like a linebacker. So I don't know. That's for next year, but we both agree.
I mean,
they're going to be
could really, you don't really know. Their offensive line could be great, that coming this season. We don't really know until we see it, but the most consistent thing is that their quarterback play. I mean, I can't even tell you the last time I actually thought that they had a good quarterback. It might have been David Garrard. That's scary.
What about who is Blaine? What about Blaine Gabbert? Wasn't he their quarterback too?
Yeah, Blaine Gabbert. See, that's another thing. I mean, I think they drafted Blaine Gabbert, and Blaine Gabbert was drafted the same draft as Christian Ponder. This was one of the worst drafts ever.
That's kind of like Carolina when they drafted Jimmy Clausen and then got Cam Newton a year later.
Yeah. Well, Jimmy Clausen, I think, was a 3rd-round pick.
Yeah, but still, he had all that hype
coming. 3rd-round pick. See, So like Jacksonville gave up on Gabbert quickly. Minnesota gave up on Christian Ponder quickly. Cleveland gave up on, every quarterback that they have quickly.
Last 20 years.
If there is a good prospect for quarterback and Blake Bortles proves that he's not, their guy after this season, I think you have to look at the position.
Maybe,
if you look at their schedule, man, they might beat the Titans. I doubt they won't be able to beat the Colts, and then they play the NFC South.
Yeah.
It's a bad division, but those teams are competitive. Like I would pick, if you gave me a bet, I would pick the Saints beating the Jaguars 9 out of 10 times.
Yeah, I completely agree. We both agree maybe a 2-win team at most.
Yeah,
so
I don't see them, and I feel bad, dude. It's got to be terrible to be a Jaguars fan.
They haven't been in the playoffs in probably 10 years, right?
Yeah, I don't think that long. I think they were in it in 2009. But the thing that sucks about Jacksonville is they actually did make strides to be a better team. They had a good draft. They made strides. They signed John Abraham. But the thing is, every other team in the AFC got a lot better.
A lot better.
Yeah. Indianapolis went from being good to potentially being outstanding, in one draft. Or not in one draft, in one offseason. So it's their division got harder. The entire AFC got harder. So while they may have made strides for the future, I don't see them, being able to compete.
Yeah, there's just let's face it. We're gonna cut to the chase a little bit. You and I both know that this is Indy's division. We're just talking about the other teams. So
yeah.
So speaking of Indy, what are your expectations for the Indianapolis Colts this year?
Man, that's tough. I want to, like, when everyone says that they're the favorite to win the Super Bowl, it kind of bothers me. But, I mean, I got to say that they're, man, that's tough. Because it's
Over
so
under
hard.
13
Like,
wins. What do you got? Over under 13 wins.
I think they're going to win 14 games. I think they're going to go 14-2 because if you look at their schedule, it's kind of a cakewalk. I mean, you get to, like, 6 of your games are against Houston, Jacksonville, and Tennessee. So, realistically, that should be 6 wins. I mean, they get to play the Patriots. They get to play, obviously, the Broncos. But I think they do pretty well against those teams. My concern is I don't know if the only thing I'm thinking about is there's no doubt Indianapolis is going to be a great team. They're going to score points. They're going to have a top 5 offense. Their defense, though, hasn't improved. You know, like, it's not much better.
Well, you know something though? You and I being Packers fans, let's go back to the 14-1 Packers. That defense was mediocre at best, and Rodgers just threw touchdowns all day.
15-1 Packers.
Yeah, 15-1 Packers. I forgot a game. You know, so Luck is definitely that kind of caliber quarterback. You know, with the more interceptions, obviously he's a little bit more raw when the interceptions, you know, for accuracy, unlike Rodgers. But you know, Rodgers was just they're blowing out teams. You know, they're just putting up so many points it didn't matter. So I think the Colts have that kind of offense, especially now with an Andre Johnson in there. You know, who I think is going to prime to have is one of his best years ever, even in his mid-30s. You know, with Andrew Luck as his quarterback now. So, you know, I completely agree with you about the defense, you know, and that's not nearly as good as it used to be, you know, back in the days of, you know, like the White Freeney, you know, and was it not Mathis? Who was the other guy who was really good on that?
Mathis.
It was Mathis and Bob Sanders. You know, those were the days where the Colts were, you know, had a legitimate defense. You know, they're battling out the Patriots when they both had good defenses. But I think
Mathis is still on the team. Like, he's still their best player.
Yeah. You know, so I think even with that defense, how good, because I love Andrew Luck. He's my favorite player that's not a Packer in the NFL. With how good he is, and now he's getting some weapons, you know, I can easily see them being 13-3, 14-2, with even with the lackluster defense.
Yeah, so. No, I feel completely committed by their offense, their schedule, and I mean they're gonna win. I really think they're gonna win 14 games, and I think they're gonna be the most high scoring team in the NFL. The problem is they're gonna get up quick on teams. They're gonna go up maybe 14. It's kind of like what Green Bay did that one year, and even last year to an extent. Their defense was better than it was, but they're going to go up quick, and then teams eliminate the run game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
You don't have to run the ball. You can't run the ball when you're down 14-0. You have to start throwing. And they have Vernon Davis. They have actually a pretty solid secondary. Or not Vernon Davis. Vontae Davis.
Vontae Davis, yeah.
But man, it's like, and then at that point, any guy can rush the pass. You can close your eyes and get a sack, man. But when it comes down to the playoffs, and they play like, you know, a team like Baltimore or Pittsburgh, who are going to be like an actual legitimate contender because they can rush the ball, they can pass the ball, and they can destroy you defensively. But they're not going to win, you know, 13 games, 14 games. But I could see the Colts losing to one of those teams because I mean, you can't be one-dimensional in the playoffs or you will lose.
Yo, you know? like the year the Packers were 15-1. The Giants got destroyed them because their defense finally got exposed, and when Rodgers got shut down, you know.
Yeah, then their game was gone. You can't stop the pass. And then now that you eliminate the one guy that is control, like I wouldn't be shocked if Andrew Luck won MVP this year.
Neither would I. You know, he's been amazing, but I think he's going to even step up and be like even more.
This is the year that he jumps. I mean, I could even say last year he was considered, you know, top 5 quarterback. But this is the year where everyone goes, okay, he's made it. He's officially elite. Now we can start. We can start with like the elite.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Like, you can't hit him. You know, it's things like that. Like, now he's officially in that elite category.
Yep. So, Colts division, easily, you and I both agree. Luck is going to, you and I both agree, big year. Defense, lackluster. Offense going to be amazing. So that's our predictions for the Colts. Moving on to the
I
Houston
have
Texans.
to make a correction. I accidentally said that Jacksonville signed John Abraham. I meant Indianapolis signed John Abraham. So I just feel like I need to correct
God,
myself on that.
how is anyone ever supposed to take you serious if you're making mistakes like that, Anthony?
I
Come on,
know.
man.
I apologize.
Now, I don't know how much you've ever watched
Oh, real
Hard.
quick, last thing about the Colts. The Colts are the one team that I would go like, oh man, I would love to have some Colts fantasy players.
Oh
But
my
that's it.
God, dude, yeah. That's
You
why I
know,
drafted Andre Johnson.
yeah, Andre Johnson, Andrew Luck, obviously, T.Y. Hilton.
Colby
They have
Fleener.
Kobe Fleener and the other one. What's his name?
I don't know their other tight end's name.
It's
Colby
Dwight
Fleener's.
something.
I only know Colby Fleener, but yeah, they're a
Dwight
nasty.
Allen.
Dwight Allen. Okay, there you go. Yeah, they're a nasty squad. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you watch Hard Knocks, but I haven't missed an episode yet this season of the Houston Texans Hard Knocks.
Dwayne Allen.
And so far, the one thing about when you watch a show like Hard Knocks, they want you to buy into the team and buy into the hype because you're watching Bill O'Brien sit there coaching up his guys, and you see all these clubhouse shenanigans, and you feel like you just feel like a part of the team. You're like, man, this team's going to be great. But when you look at them, they were an interesting team last year because they started out pretty well, and then they fell off and came on a little bit towards the end. They faced some injuries. Cushing was hurt, and Jadeveon Clowney only played I think 3 games. But you got that monster in J.J. Watt, who almost won MVP as a defensive player, which is something extremely hard to do. And then you look at their quarterback situation. Last year I think they went through 3 different quarterbacks. But they got their Arian Foster's hurt temporarily, but they got guys like Chris Polk and Blue. I forget his first name. It's not Adrian Blue. It's Alfred. I think it's Alfred Blue. Alfred Blue. And they got guys like DeAndre Hopkins, who's going to have a really big shot to step up now that Andre Johnson's gone. But I don't think they're a team that is bad. I like their defense, especially if it stays healthy. But I just you got Brian Hoyer, who started out good with Cleveland last year, but then ended up getting benched for Johnny Manziel. And how good is Ryan Mallett, their replacement? So it's kind of there. But I honestly see them as a team that maybe could compete for a second wild card if everything falls in. They stay healthy because they could be a 9-7, 10-6 team. But I think a realistic expectations would be 6-10 or 8-8.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because I feel like we're just saying that everything is falling in place from it was last year. But here's the thing. Like I said it already, the AFC has gotten better. The AFC is the big dogs, kind of. Last year, the last 2 weeks, there was 9 potential playoff teams, And that's not changing.
No.
The AFC North... 3 of the 4 teams could potentially make the playoffs again. The AFC East is excellent. I would say that 3 of those 4 teams could make the playoffs. Obviously,
Legitimately, everyone in the East could be 8-8 or better. Legitimately.
Yeah. I mean, I don't like the Jets, but their defense is so good that they could sneak 8 wins out. And then the AFC West, you have. I mean, Oakland's not going to do anything.
But you still got to be.
They're going to make strides. I think Oakland's better than they were.
I like Oakland more than the Titans and the Jags.
Yeah, no, me too. And but obviously you got Denver, you've got San Diego. They're gonna play well, and then Kansas City's no slouch either. So it's man, I don't see the Houstons. Houston is allergic to wanting a quarterback. Even when they had. Schwab, they never even thought about upgrading from Schwab, and they could have been a serious playoff contender.
Yeah, because Schwab would always start out with his first 5 weeks every year just really good, and then he'd get hurt, and then he'd
fall off,
and then he got pick six-itis, where he just threw pick sixes every single week, and it would kill the Texans. I remember he threw 4 weeks in a row where he had a pick six. Mm-hmm. He was not good. So, what are your expectations for the Titans or Texans record-wise, though?
They were 9-7 last year. I can't see them doing that again. If you look at their schedule,
even with a healthy Cushing and Watt and Jadeveon Clowney.
I mean, their defense is going to be good. There's not a doubt about that. But here's the thing, dude. their quarterback situation is not great, and I don't even think they have good like game managers there because obviously, Kansas City's been winning 10 games with
Alex Smith.
Alex Smith.
But think
so
about it.
They have a game manager, but I don't see Hoyer. I don't see Mallet. I don't see Tom Savage. I don't see any of those guys as game managers.
But
I just don't see them as good.
Arian Foster, though, has been touches the ball almost more than any running back in the NFL. They're going to be getting him back. Blue is no slouch for a backup. Come on now. If Arian Foster ran them to a 9-7 record, with that defense, if it stays healthy, they could maybe be 9-7 again.
Maybe. Let's read their. Let me read their regular season. They played the Chiefs at home, at Carolina, versus the Bucks at home, at Atlanta, versus the Colts at home, at the Jaguars, at the Dolphins, versus the Titans, at the Bengals, versus the Jets, versus the Saints, at the Bills, versus the Patriots, at the Colts, at the Titans, versus the Jaguars. So, man, you know what?
See, I look at that schedule. Week 1, KC at Houston. Houston could beat them at home. They could, because Houston, they could. Then Houston at Carolina. Come on now, Carolina was awful to start the year, so they could last year.
Carolina's the same thing. Like man, that's tough.
So I could see them winning that game. Tampa at Houston.
They have a couple hard games.
Their first 5
at the Bills, versus the Patriots, at the Colts. Like that 3 stretch is where they can, if they can win one of those 3 games, they could make the playoffs.
I think they're on the cusp playoff team if they stay healthy. But if they struggle too much and Brian Hoyer looks like he did with the second half of Cleveland, then they're fucked. They're absolutely screwed. So,
man, I actually let me go through. Let me just do a real quick thing. You could talk about it for a second. I want to see how many games that I think they could win because after like reading their schedule aloud,
here's would be my thought. Week 1, KC at Houston, I could see them winning. Week 2, Houston at Carolina, I could see them winning. Tampa at Houston, I could see them winning. Houston at Atlanta, I'm going to chalk it up as a loss because Matt Ryan's usually unbeatable at home.
Home. He's good at home.
Then Indy at Houston is a loss. Houston at Jacksonville is a win. Houston at Miami is a toss-up, depending on how the Dolphins are playing then. Tennessee,
I think the Dolphins are going to be good.
Yeah, I do too. But, they were kind of streaky last year. They were playing really good at home. They almost beat the Packers, and then they went on a losing streak at home, for a few weeks, and they were inconsistent. So for me, like right there, their first 5-6 weeks,
wins.
Yeah, right off the bat. And it's not like I'm just saying it to support my case. There's based on their team last year, there's legitimate cause to believe that they could win those games. So
I mean, they could beat the Bengals. They are a similar team to the Bengals.
Especially if the Bengals are playing like on a Sunday night or a Monday night game against them. Andy Dalton never plays good in prime time. So easily right there. So I don't know. That's just my take on it. I think
see them. I don't know. Looking at it now, dude, I could see them going 10-6. Looking at their schedule,
I see him.
Hey, and if J.J. Watt can continue to do what he's done in his career so far, he's like, whenever you watch him play, you're watching the best player not at his position,
just in the NFL.
In the entire NFL. I'm watching like a once in a lifetime talent whenever I watch him play.
I was actually listening to Mike and Mike this morning, and they were actually talking. Mike Golick was talking about, because Pro Football Focus was talking about J.J. Watt already being the best defensive, end of all time. But he's like, no, Reggie White, which I could agree with. And Watt's only been in the league 4 years. But just like the sheer dominance and how much better he is than everyone on the football field is just scary. It's absolutely nuts. So I think, you and I could both come to an agreement that they're an 8-8 or better team, in my opinion.
Now, here's the question. I guess this is something that we kind of would go through after we look at all the teams. But do you think that the AFC South will have two teams representing the AFC South in the playoffs?
No shot. It's going to be Indy and then maybe the Texans. And that's only if the AFC East isn't as good as everyone thinks it is.
Yeah, because honestly, whenever I look at and talk about it, I foresee it like this. I see Indy with the number 1 seed. I see whoever wins the AFC East with the number 2 seed, Denver with the 3 seed, and with the 4 seed, I like Pittsburgh, but Baltimore's no slouch. Baltimore will make the playoffs, so that leaves one more team with that 6th seed, and that's between Cincinnati's always. Dude, they always win 10 games. Like,
yeah,
it's just something in it. They always win 10 games. Then you have Baltimore, Miami, or New England, who could potentially all be that 6th seed. San Diego, Kansas City. It's like, then where does Houston sit? Like, man, that's tough. It really is tough.
I just think they're on the bubble. They could be like this year's Chiefs, It's like the Chiefs.
Absolutely.
The Chiefs were good, and then they were bad, and then they were good. But that's mainly because their defense and, having Jamal Charles doesn't hurt, But, I'm not saying they're for sure lock, but I'm just saying don't underrate what they did last year,
Yeah, and you talked about Hopkins. Hopkins is a stud, dude.
Yeah,
I had him last year, and I hate to bring up fantasy, but I had him as a fantasy quarterback or a fantasy wide receiver, and I was like, holy crap, he is just consistently putting numbers up, and you kind of don't even think about it, Like, you're just like...
No. Well, that's because he doesn't have a quarterback, It's a lackluster quarterback, so you don't think of him being able to put up those kind of numbers. But he is good.
I kind of feel bad for the Houston Texans because they are this team that has a ton of potential, but they don't have a franchise quarterback. If they were to have a guy that, it's hard, but not even an elite quarterback, but a top, like a Matt Stafford, they would be pretty fucking good.
No, yeah, they'd be really good. No doubt about it. Because they've and the Texans, when the Colts were down for those couple of years, they were the class of the division just for a couple of years, mainly because, the 1 year the Colts were down. But they just could never do anything in the playoffs, and then Matt Schaub would choke away games late in the year. So, they were always that 8-8 squad after starting out good with good potential. So, I don't know. Mm-hmm. This year, I don't know. I like them. I see them as an on-the-bubble playoff team. But you and I both agree, wrapping up the AFC South, it's going to be, for me, it would be the Colts, Texans, Titans, Jags. That'd be my.
That's how I would say it. 13-3, 14-2 for Indy. Houston anywhere between
8-8, 10-6.
8-8 to 10-6, depending on how well their offense plays.
Yep.
I don't see the Titans winning more than 4 games. I don't see Jacksonville winning more than 3 games.
Yeah, they're trash. So let's move on to the NFC South here. Let's start with the Atlanta Falcons. What are your thoughts on them?
I mean, I love Julio Jones. I think he's the best wide receiver in the NFL.
Better than
Matt
Brown.
Ryan.
Better than Brown. You'd rather have him over Antonio Brown.
Oh, if I had to start a football team right now, I would pick Julio Jones over Antonio Brown.
Wow.
I think Antonio Brown's outstanding, but I think Julio is like, whenever I watched him put up 250 yards against Green Bay. I was like, please, just double team him.
This is like when Calvin Johnson, 3 years ago, when he was in his peak. That kind of good. That's how good Julio is.
I really do. And what's scary is he hasn't even hit his potential yet.
Yeah. He's amazing.
He's always just been that guy that is really good.
Yeah.
But he hasn't been
Guess who I would take over Julio Jones, though? Guess who I would take?
Who?
Odell Beckham Jr., and I wouldn't think twice about it.
If you were to do a dynasty, not a fantasy one, but a dynasty, if you were to start a franchise and you had to pick one wide receiver, you would pick
Odell Beckham. Yeah. No doubt about it. And I wouldn't even think twice about it.
I mean, it's so hard because he's only had one season, but I could see him doing it for the rest of his career. I mean, he had such an amazing, outstanding rookie season.
He's just got the physical tools, man, and just his ability to catch anything. When you got Eli Manning, you're not going to get many passes between the numbers. So, he's just a stud. But anyways, back on track for the Falcons.
Yeah.
What do you predict for their record this year? Because that South is a weird division. Because
it's a very, very weird division.
The Panthers first team ever to win it back-to-back. First team ever to win it back-to-back. Can you believe that?
Yeah, Carolina. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, they were the first team ever to win that division back to back. There's so much parity in that division.
I want to say, I don't. After seeing Calvin Benjamin get hurt, I think it really is going to affect. Because I mean, they weren't good last year. Carolina wasn't good.
No,
the first half of the
terrible.
season.
They were terrible.
It wasn't until Calvin Benjamin really broke out to where they got better, and now they lost their number one target. And they don't really have anyone to replace him with. I think they just traded today for Kevin Norwood from Seattle.
And they got Devin Funches, right? They drafted him.
I like Devin Funches.
Yeah, but he's
man,
Benjamin.
I don't think that they can win it 3 years in a row.
But I still think that Carolina will be probably the second best team in that division now. Because I like them more than the Saints.
Between me, I go, who's going to win the division is between Atlanta and New Orleans. And neither team, I think, is actually very good.
All right, so Atlanta, you think might win the division like 9-7, 10-6?
I don't even think they're going to win 10 games.
Yeah,
9-7. Whoever wins that division, it's going to happen again. It's going to be a 9-7 win.
Because I don't like Atlanta's defense whatsoever, and I
it's
like
not very good.
I like I love Jones, I really do, and Roddy White has been hurt, but I don't know. I hate that division. No team is ever consistent. Atlanta a few years ago was 14-2. Now they can barely win 9 games. So I hate their defense.
I mean, I really like Matt Ryan, but
the
thing is, their offensive line was atrocious last year.
Yeah,
it was just awful. And a lot of it was injury. It was all injury. Like they would lose like their number one left guard in one game, and then they'd lose their backup left guard in the next game, and then all of a sudden you're playing with your third string guys on prime positions like a left guard. That's hard to overcome. So obviously they could be better in that sense this year. I don't think you can be worse on an offensive line than you were last year.
And then guys like Steve Jackson was a complete fail there last year too. He didn't do anything last year. So, but I agree with you completely. They win 9 games that win that division because it's not.
And whoever wins 9 games wins that division, and it's kind of hard for me to predict it because it's such a weird division, man. It is like, New Orleans, they could come out and be great.
Yeah,
but they could come out and be bad. It's so hard. Every team but Tampa Bay was in it at the end to win it last year. I mean, Carolina won it, dude, and they were 7-8-1.
And the thing is, the biggest thing for me with the Saints winning the division is like they were a team last year that solely relied at winning at home because they couldn't win on the road, but then they couldn't even win at home late in the year. They were dropping games.
No, they couldn't.
So I don't know. It's like their defense is, you're losing Jimmy Graham. So I don't know. But before we get to the Saints, let's just wrap up with the Falcons here. I'm going with you. I think they're anywhere from a 6 to 9 win team. They stay healthy, they could win the division, but they're a team that they're definitely not that great. It's going to be a mediocre division. So I say 6 to 9 wins. What do you say?
I'm gonna say they're gonna win the division at 8-8.
That's a legitimate thing. So let's move on to let's move on to the Saints here real quick, and then
Nolans.
There we go. Drew Brees getting older. They lose Jimmy Graham. They still got guys like Cooks and Stills and old Marcus Colston. They had a bright spot, and Ingram really stepped up last year and looked like the player they traded up to get a few years ago in the draft. Their defense, isn't as good as it used to be. The only thing I've heard about the Saints' defense this last year was a former defensive player, Darren Sharper, getting in trouble for rape. So that's about the only thing that relevant that the Saints' defense has done this past year. So for me, it's like I used to buy into the Saints. I'm like, man, they're going to win this division. But then they come out and they just disappoint. They can't win on the road. I know what Drew Brees is, but he's a guy that he throws a lot of picks. He's losing his best receiver option, Jimmy Graham. So I don't know. I don't see them winning any more than 6-7 games this year.
So I don't know. I think the Saints defense is a bit underrated going into this year. Like I really like their secondary. I think they have an awesome secondary.
I forgot about Jarius Byrd. He's coming back healthy this year.
he's coming back healthy. Vaccaro was awesome as a safety. Like he proved that he was a good safety. They signed Brandon Browner. So I actually do like their secondary.
All right, yeah, it's better.
Starters.
It's better than I thought. I guess you convinced me. You won me over on the dark.
Yeah, and then Cameron Jordan is no slouch. So I do like parts of their defense, you know. But the biggest question mark for me is I don't know how Sean Payton is going to do with an offense. Because, like, the Saints' offense is always kind of, like, they've never had a great running back, right? I mean, they've always just had guys. And Mark Ingram had a good year last year. Really good year last year.
He had over 1,000 yards, I think, right?
Yeah, he was the 1,000-yard rusher.
Yeah.
And so, actually, last year he had 964 yards.
Close enough, 1,000 yards.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure he didn't start playing until, like, week 7 or 8.
Yeah.
It wasn't that late. I think it was, like, week 4 or 5.
Week 4 or 5, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't that late. But, anyway, their team is... Brandon Cooks is going to be the shit. But they don't have that high-powered, like, passing offense that they had in years past. So they're going to run the ball down people's throats. So Mark Ingram is going to get a lot of touches. CJ Spiller is going to get a lot of touches. And I'm curious to see how that kind of, like, plays out. I'm actually I hate the Saints, dude. I always have. But I'm actually kind of anticipating to see how they play.
You know what, for me, is kind of a concern? Is if they can't run the ball effectively this year and they have to throw it a lot, how much does that hurt Cooks' production, you know, not having a Jimmy Graham to line up by him, you know, take off some pressure?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that might hurt them a little bit too, you know, because he was a huge piece to that offense for years.
Oh, so, absolutely. I mean, he was that kind of offense for the last 3-4 years.
Yeah. So, I don't know. For me, what do you predict them win-wise?
Like I said, it's between them and Atlanta to win the division. So I got to say the same thing. I said 8-8. I got to say like between 7-9 and 9-7.
All right,
whoever wins, man, that's tough. I don't know. If you look at their schedule, let me just read it real quick. At the Cardinals, first the Bucks. At the Panthers versus the Cowboys. At the Eagles versus the Falcons. At the Colts versus the Giants.
They got a hard schedule.
Titans, Redskins, Texans, Panthers, Bucks, Lions, Jags, Falcons. Dude, I seen more losses, I think, than I seen wins.
Yeah, you know, like I'm sticking with my guns. 6-8 wins, and I'm not budging from that. I'm not budging. All right, so let's move on here.
They're going to be a good run team, though.
Yeah, you know. They better be a good run team because you're losing Jimmy Graham. You got to be able to get the ball downfield other ways. You know, Drew Brees already throws a lot of picks. So, you know, you got to take some pressure. Look at Tony Romo. You give him DeMarco Murray the good year and look how his picks fell. You know, so I don't know.
That's true.
Let's move on to the Bucks. Probably don't have to get too wordy with them. You know, they lose. Their defense is, you know, it's not a great defense. You got a rookie quarterback at Jameis Winston. You got guys like Mike Evans, who's coming off a great year. You got Vincent Jackson, Doug Martin, who's looking to stay healthy. Maybe a 4-5 win team at most for me.
Yeah, I can't buy into the Bucks, dude. I love Lovie Smith as a coach. I'm really excited to see how they transition because everyone said last year. You remember when they signed Josh McCown? They were like, because the Bucks defense the year prior was actually pretty good.
That was with Revis, right? That was when Revis.
Yeah, Revis was there.
Yeah. Akeem Talib.
Gerald McCoy. He's one of the best defensive tackles in the league. I mean, he's top 3.
Wasn't Talib on the Bucks? No.
I don't think he was there that year. I think that he'd already went to Denver.
No, because Talib went last year to Denver.
No, he was on New England that year.
Oh, okay, he was on New England. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're right.
So, I don't know, man. I'm actually kind of excited to watch the Bucks. It's a team that I am rooting for secretly. You know, I'm not rooting for them to win like at all, but I'm kind of hoping. I like Lovie Smith, dude. I think Lovie Smith's a really good coach. I'm excited to watch Jameis Winston. I am excited to watch Mariota. Like I said earlier, I already talked about how I think
Oh, you
Mariota is
mean
better than the two.
yeah?
But
You
I'm
mean
excited.
Winston? Winston, you mean
What'd I say?
Mariota?
I talked about Mariota earlier.
Yeah,
But I'm
yeah,
excited to watch both Winston and Mariota play.
yeah. I think this is a better
Hopefully
QB
they show
class.
strides.
I think this is a better QB class in the last couple of years than we've saw.
Yeah,
Besides,
a lot of people want to see NFL players become bust. Not me, man. I like the fact that I want every team to have a franchise quarterback. I want every team to be competitive.
yeah,
It
yeah.
makes football funner to watch. If you go, if I don't know, every time that you're a Colts fan and you go into Jacksonville, you kind of know that you're gonna win because
Yeah,
the Colts. You have an elite quarterback or anything like that. It's no one wants to watch a team that has terrible players.
it's kind of like the Vikings over the last 10 years. You got Dante Culpepper and Tavares
Yeah.
Jackson and Christian Ponder and Donovan
And then the
McNabb.
one year that they had a great quarterback, they were great.
Yeah,
I mean, when they had Brett Favre, dude, as much as I hated losing to them, those games and those teams that they played in, those Packers versus
Vikings games
Minnesota
were
games,
awesome. Yeah,
were awesome to watch because it was truly competitive. And even when Jay Cutler first came to the NFC North, it was competitive. You know,
even though he couldn't beat the Packers.
no one wants to have a bad quarterback. No one wants to watch a team with a bad quarterback. And I hope that these guys on these rookies, Winston and Mariota, they're actually good. I'm hoping for them, but it's a rookie year, dude. I don't see Tampa Bay winning more than 4 games.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
But I hope they continue with Lovie Smith. I hope they make strides, but just lose games, late or don't get blown out. I hope they're not completely terrible because I hope Lovie Smith continues to rebuild the team.
Yeah, I think Lovie Smith, he got the short end of the stick in Chicago because he had them competitive just about every year. I agree with you. He's a great coach, and I think he's got a couple more years left before the seat starts getting hot underneath his butt. But I agree, 4 wins at most. So let's wrap this up here with our last predictions for the Carolina Panthers. I'll let you go first.
5-11.
And that's because losing Benjamin.
Yeah, losing Benjamin. I don't know. I just don't think. I mean, Cam Newton's already been one of the most hit quarterbacks. I think he is the most hit quarterback in the last 4 seasons. He's gonna get hit a lot, dude. I just don't see. Don't see them winning that division 3 years in a row. And we already talked about how the division's going to go to whoever wins. If you win 9 games, you win that division. And if you win 8 games, you might win that division. So I see them, going 3-3 in the division, but they're not going to beat some of these great teams. I still think the Cowboys are better. I still think I don't know. The Packers are better. The Eagles are better. The Seahawks are better. Let me read. Those are the teams that they have to play this year. That's tough.
Yeah.
The Colts, the Cowboys, and then if they go 3-3, I named 5 teams that'll beat them right there. And then if they go 3-3 in the division, that's 8 wins automatically. So then you're tossed up between teams like the Texans. You're tossed up between teams like the Redskins.
And see, the biggest thing, too, is a few years ago when they were really good, I think they were a 12-win team 3 years ago. Their defense was amazing. You couldn't mess with that defense. And that was before Kelvin Benjamin. Yeah, that was back when they still had Steve Smith Sr. But, now you lost Kelvin Benjamin. You got to hope D'Angelo Williams stays healthy all year because Jonathan Stewart's gone. Devin Funchess is your number 1. You got a defense that's not nearly as good, even though I like Kuechly a lot. So with the way the South has been for parity wise, they're the first team ever to win it back to back. I see them taking a step back. Yeah, I think they're a 5-11 team too. So,
and you know what? I really think that it's probably not the worst thing that can happen to them because Carolina, they need some help. They need to legitimately get if Carolina could go out and get another Kelvin Benjamin, and then come back next year. with and have a top 15 pick and they get an elite wide receiver,
they would be all set. They could win that division easily. So,
really,
for me in the division, I'm gonna go Atlanta, Saints, Panthers, Bucks. That's how I would do it.
Yep, same thing.
All right, so that's gonna wrap up the very first edition of the Tuesday Blitz. We're gonna be back probably in the next couple of days to preview. We'll do the Norths next, since being NFC North fans, and it'll be a nice conversation to have, especially for a Lions fan. Because I know.
I really, I like talking about the AFC North too. I think that is
that's the cream of the crop division.
It might be the best division in the NFL. I mean, there's two teams on it that have won Super Bowls in the last 6 years. No other division can say that.
So we'll be back in a couple of days to talk about the Norths, and tell me what you guys think of these videos. Do you like them? Are you looking forward to more of these podcasts? Any changes we should do? So I'm John Check, and it's my buddy Anthony. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what you think. Have a good one.
Thanks, guys.